Request shocked him. Part 5. The afternoon stretched into evening as Vorathrex sat in the field surrounded by 47 children who had completely forgotten to be afraid of him. They climbed on his tail and asked him endless questions and showed him their favorite rocks and flowers and bugs. Minho refused to leave the dragon's side, explaining in great detail about every drawing he had ever made and every story Teacher Yuna had told them. The adults of New Horizon watched from a distance. Unable to process what they were seeing, Governor Chun stood beside Yuna with his mouth hanging open. "He is playing with them," he said in disbelief. "The most terrifying being in the sector is playing with our children." "He is not terrifying to them," Yuna said. "They only know the stories I told them, and in those stories, dragons are protectors and friends." "How did you know this would work?" the governor asked. "How could you possibly have predicted that he would respond this way?" Yuna watched as Vorathrex carefully lifted little Yunji onto his shoulder so she could see the view from up high. "I did not know," she admitted. "I only hoped, and sometimes hope is all we have." As the sun began to set, Vorathrex called for the attention of everyone present. The children gathered at his feet, and the adults moved closer. Still nervous, but no longer paralyzed by fear, "I have something to announce," Vorathrex said in a voice that carried across the entire settlement. "And I want all of you to hear it." He looked down at the children who had claimed him as their own. "I came here expecting to fulfill a legal obligation," he said. "I came here because a brave teacher found a loophole in my ancient laws and used it to get my attention. And I was curious about the children who had made drawings for a dragon they had never met." He paused, and the fire in his eyes seemed to soften. "But I did not expect to feel this way," he continued. "I did not expect to remember what it was like when the Draconari were guardians instead of conquerors. And I did not expect 47 human children to remind me of who I was supposed to be." He raised his head and addressed the adults directly. "From this moment forward, New Horizon is designated as a Draconari nursery world," he declared. "This is the highest protection status in our empire, reserved for planets where our young are raised. And it has never before been granted to a world outside our core territories." Gasps of shock echoed through the crowd. "High Chief, what does this mean?" Governor Chun asked. "It means that any attack on this world will be treated as an attack on the Draconari Empire itself," Vorathrex explained. "It means that the full force of 17 star systems will defend these children and everyone who cares for them. But we are not Draconari," someone said. "We are humans. You are under my protection," Vorathrex replied, "and that makes you family." And the Draconari do not abandon family. The colonists began to cheer, hugging each other and crying with relief for the first time since their colony had been established. They were truly safe, but Vorathrex was not finished. He looked down at Minho, who was still standing at his feet with a look of pure joy on his small face. "I have one more announcement," he said. "This boy drew a picture that changed my heart, and in Draconari tradition, such a gift deserves recognition." He reached down and gently placed one massive claw under Minho's chin. Tilting his face upward, "Minho, I am declaring you a flame heir of the Draconari Empire," Vorathrex said. "This means that you are unofficially adopted into my bloodline, and you will always have a place in my court and my protection wherever you go." Minho's eyes grew impossibly wide. "I am your family now?" he asked. "You are my family now," Vorathrex confirmed. "And I expect you to keep making drawings for me, because I want to cover the walls of my throne room with pictures made by someone who believes dragons can be kind." Minho threw his arms as far around Vorathrex's leg as they would reach, which was not very far at all. "I will make you a new drawing every week," he promised. "And I will learn to draw even better, so you will be proud of me. I'm already proud of you." Vorathrex said softly. The news of what happened on New Horizons spread even faster than the news of what had happened in the Obsidian Throne Hall within days. The entire sector was talking about the dragon who had adopted a human colony and declared a child his heir. The Vorthian Empire withdrew their territorial claim within hours. The Tazari Collective followed. Soon after, the Krethian Federation sent formal apologies for any past disputes and requested permission to establish trade relations. Supply ships arrived from across the sector, bringing food and medicine and building materials. Scientists and engineers came to help improve the colony's infrastructure. Teachers from other worlds applied to work at Yuna's school, which had suddenly become famous across the galaxy. 1 year later, New Horizon was unrecognizable. The struggling agricultural colony had transformed into a thriving settlement with new buildings and expanded fields and a school that served as a model for education throughout the sector. Children from other colonies came specifically to study under teacher Yuna, whose methods had become legendary, and every month without fail, a Draconari diplomatic vessel arrived carrying gifts from Vorathrex. There were books and educational supplies and scientific equipment and works of art from 100 different worlds. But there was also always a personal letter addressed to Minho, written in Vorathrex's own hand, asking about his studies and his friends and his newest drawings. Minho kept every letter in a special box under his bed and read them whenever he missed his dragon. On the first anniversary of Vorathrex's visit, another ship arrived at New Horizon. This one was smaller than the flagship, but still impressive. And it carried a passenger that no one had expected, a young Draconari descended from the vessel, barely larger than the human children and still covered in the soft scales of youth. My name is Pyrrhus, the young dragon said nervously, and the High Chief sent me here to learn. To learn what? Governor Chun asked. To learn how humans teach their young, Pyrrhus explained. He said that teacher Yuna understands something about education that we have forgotten, and he wants me to discover what it is. Yuna stepped forward with a welcoming smile. We would be honored to have you in our school, she said. Can you draw? I have never tried, Pyrrhus admitted. Then that will be your first lesson, Yuna said. Come with me, and I will introduce you to your classmates. The human children welcomed Pyrrhus with open arms. Fascinated by their new dragon friend, they taught him how to hold a pencil in his claws and showed him how to mix colors and explained what made a good composition. By the end of his first week, Pyrrhus had created his own drawing. It showed a human with too many fingers and a smile that was far too wide, standing beside a dragon who looked suspiciously like himself. The human in the picture was wearing a teacher's outfit and holding a book. Who is this? Yuna asked when Pyrrhus showed her the drawing. It is you, Pyrrhus said shyly. I wanted to show the High Chief what you look like, because he always asked about you in his letters. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. It is perfect, she said that evening. She sat alone in her classroom after all the students had gone home. She looked at the walls covered in drawings from dozens of children, both human and now Draconari. She looked at the letter of commendation from the Galactic Education Council hanging beside her desk. She looked at the picture Minho had drawn of her standing beside Vorathrex with all 47 of her original students gathered around them a year ago. She had been a desperate teacher on a dying world with nothing but hope and a bag full of children's drawings. Now she was the founder of the most famous school in the sector and the woman who had reminded an ancient dragon what it meant to be kind, and it had all started with a request for 25 cents. She smiled and picked up her pen to write her monthly letter to Vorathrex, telling him about Pyrrhus's progress and Minho's newest drawings, and all the small miracles that happened every day in her classroom, because some gifts were not measured in money or power or territory. Some gifts were measured in hope and kindness and the belief that even the most ancient hearts could learn to love again, and those gifts were worth more than all the stars in the sky. The news of what happened in the Obsidian Throne Hall spread across the sector like wildfire, and by the time Yuna's transport ship was halfway home, the entire galaxy seemed to be talking about the human teacher who had moved the dragon chief with children's drawings on New Horizon. The colonists received the message with a mixture of joy and absolute terror. Governor Chun called an emergency meeting in the colony's main hall, and nearly every adult on the planet attended. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," the governor said with disbelief clear on his face. Teacher Park went to the Draconari homeworld, asked the most powerful being in the sector for pocket change, and somehow convinced him to adopt our entire colony. "That appears to be accurate," said the communications officer. "We have received official confirmation from the Draconari Diplomatic Corps, and the High Chief's personal flagship is currently en route to our planet. The High Chief himself is coming here," someone shouted from the crowd. "His ship is large enough to crush our entire settlement." Panic began to spread through the assembly. The Draconari were known throughout the galaxy as ancient and terrifying beings, and their High Chief was the oldest and most terrifying of them all. Stories said he had burned entire planets to ash and destroyed fleets with a single breath. "Everyone, please remain calm," Governor Chun said, though his own voice was shaking. "We have 37 days to prepare for the High Chief's arrival, and we need to focus on what we can control." "What can we possibly do?" an older farmer asked. "We have nothing to offer someone like that, and our buildings are falling apart, and our fields have barely produced enough food to survive this season." "We do have something to offer," a quiet voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Yuna standing there with her worn bag still clutched against her chest. "Teacher Park," Governor Chun exclaimed. "When did you arrive?" "Just now," Yuna said. "I took a faster transport from the last relay station, and I wanted to be here before the preparations began." She walked to the front of the hall, and the crowd parted to let her through. "I know you are all afraid," she said. "I know the Draconari have a reputation for being dangerous and unpredictable, and I know that having the High Chief visit our small colony seems like a disaster waiting to happen." She opened her bag and pulled out the shimmering scale that Vorathrex had given her. Gasps filled the room as the colonists saw the ancient artifact pulsing with inner fire. "But I have spoken with him," Yuna continued, "and I have seen what lies beneath the legends and the fear. And I believe that Vorathrex is coming here not to destroy us, but to meet the children who believe in him." "How can you be certain?" Governor Chun asked. "How do you know he will not change his mind or decide that we are not worth his protection?" Yuna smiled softly. "Because he cried when he looked at Minho's drawing," she said. "I do not think a being who cries over a child's artwork is planning to hurt anyone." The room fell silent as the colonists processed this information. "What do you need from us?" "Teacher Park," the governor finally asked. "I need you to trust me," Yuna said. "And I need you to help me prepare a proper welcome for our guest. Not with expensive gifts or elaborate ceremonies, but with the one thing that moved him in the first place. The children." Someone said, "The children," Yuna confirmed. "They need to make new drawings, and they need to practice their greetings, and most importantly, they need to understand that they are about to meet someone very important who came all this way just to see them." Over the next 37 days, New Horizon transformed. The colonists worked harder than they had ever worked before. Not to build elaborate structures or acquire expensive treasures, but to make their humble settlement as welcoming as possible. They repaired the school building and painted it in bright colors. They planted flowers along the main path and hung decorations made from recycled materials. They cleaned every corner of the colony until it shone but the most important. Preparations happened in Teacher Yuna's classroom every day. She gathered her 47 students and told them more stories about the dragon who was coming to visit. She taught them about Draconari customs and showed them how to bow properly. She helped them make new drawings, each one more beautiful than the last. Minho worked on his newest picture for days, refusing to let anyone see it until it was perfect. "Is the dragon really coming to see us?" Little Yunji asked one afternoon. "Yes," Yuna said. "He's coming all this way just to meet you." "But why?" Jiwan asked. "We are not important like kings or generals." Yuna knelt down to look at her students at eye level. "You are more important than any king or general," she said, "because you reminded him of something he had forgotten, and because your drawing showed him that kindness still exists in the universe." The children did not fully understand, but they believed their teacher, and that was enough. On the morning of the 37th day, a shadow fell across New Horizon. The colonists looked up to see the most massive ship any of them had ever encountered, slowly descending through the clouds. It was shaped like a dragon in flight, with wings that stretched for kilometers and eyes that burned with actual fire. Panic began to spread again as people ran for shelter. But the children did not run. They stood in a line outside the school, each one holding their newest drawing, each one wearing their cleanest clothes, each one waiting to meet the dragon from their teacher's stories. Yuna stood with them, her heart pounding, but her face calm. "Remember what I taught you," she said softly. "Be polite, be brave, and be yourselves." "What if he does not like us?" Suman whispered. "Then he is not the dragon I told you about," Yuna replied. "But I believe he is, and I believe he's going to love meeting you." The ship landed in the field outside the settlement, and a massive door slowly opened. Vorathrex emerged into the sunlight of New Horizon, and even Yuna gasped at the sight of him. He was enormous, larger than any building on the colony, with scales that reflected the light like liquid metal and eyes that burned with ancient fire. The adults of the colony cowered in fear, but the children remained still, staring up at the dragon with wonder instead of terror. Minho was the first to move. He broke away from the line and ran toward Vorathrex before anyone could stop him. "Minho, wait," Yuna called, but the boy did not listen. He ran right up to the massive dragon and stopped at his feet, craning his neck to look up at the ancient being who towered above him. "Are you the dragon from Teacher's Stories?" he asked in a small but clear voice. Vorathrex lowered his massive head until he was at eye level with the tiny human child. "I am Vorathrex, the Undying," he said. "And you must be Minho, the boy who draws dragons protecting humans." Minho's face broke into a huge smile. "I made a new one for you," he said, and he held up his drawing. Vorathrex took the paper with impossible gentleness, handling it like it was the most precious object in the universe. The drawing showed Vorathrex surrounded by all 47 children, with the words, "Our Dragon," written across the top in Minho's careful handwriting. And for the second time in 2,000 years, something wet appeared in the ancient dragon's burning eyes. "Our dragon," he repeated softly. "That is what you are now," Minho said matter-of-factly. "Teacher said you came to protect us, so that makes you our dragon." Vorathrex looked up at Yuna, who was walking toward them with the rest of the children following behind. "Your students are remarkable, Teacher Yuna," he said. "They learn from the best," she replied. "And I do not mean myself." The other children gathered around, each one holding up their drawing for the dragon to see, and Vorathrex, who had conquered worlds and outlived civilizations, sat down in the field outside a failing colony and spent the rest of the afternoon looking at pictures made by children who had never seen a dragon before today. Vorathrex examined each drawing with the care of someone handling priceless artifacts, and the entire hall watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen the high Chief show such interest in anything that was not related to power or territory. He held up a drawing made by a girl named Hana, which showed a dragon with scales that changed color like a rainbow. "Why did this child give my scales different colors?" he asked. "Because Hana believes that dragons can be anything they want to be." Yuna explained. "She has a condition that makes her different from the other children. And I told her that dragons celebrate differences instead of hiding them." Vorathrex made a sound that might have been approval. He picked up another drawing. This one from a boy named Timon. The dragon in this picture was surrounded by books and stars and mathematical equations. "Timon wants to be a scientist," Yuna said without being asked. "He calculates the distances between stars for fun. And he believes that dragons must be very intelligent to have built such a large empire." "He is not wrong," Vorathrex said. He continued through the drawings one by one. And Yuna told him about each child. There was Yejin, who drew dragons dancing in space because she believed that even ancient beings needed to have fun sometimes. There was Junho, who drew a dragon teaching a classroom full of humans because he thought sharing knowledge was the greatest gift anyone could give. There was Minji, who drew a dragon crying over a wounded bird because she wanted to show that being powerful did not mean being heartless. With each story, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. The advisors, who had been hostile, began to look uncertain. The other petitioners stopped whispering and started listening. Even the guards seemed moved by the simple drawings and the stories behind them. Korvath stepped forward with concern on his scaled face. "Hi, Chief," he said quietly. "I must advise caution. And you must consider the political implications of what this human is asking." "I am aware of the implications," Vorathrex replied without looking up from a drawing of a dragon playing with human children. "If you grant her petition, you will be extending Draconari protection to a colony in disputed territory," Korvath continued. "The Vorthians and Tazari and Krethians will all demand explanations, and they may see this as an act of aggression." "Let them demand," Vorathrex said. "My chief, this could destabilize the entire sector," Korvath pressed. "Wars have been started over less, and you would risk all of this for 47 human children you have never met." Vorathrex finally looked up, and his eyes burned with something that was not anger. "When did we become so afraid of doing what is right?" he asked. "When did the Draconari stop being guardians and start being politicians?" Korvath had no answer. Vorathrex turned to the other alien delegations. "Waiting in the hall, you have all come here today seeking things from me," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "You have offered me wealth and loyalty and strategic advantages, and you have expected me to calculate the value of your proposals and respond accordingly." He held up Menho's drawing, the one showing a dragon protecting a small human from angry stars. "But none of you have offered me something made with hope," he continued. "None of you have given me a gift that asks for nothing except the chance to believe in something good." A Tazari merchant shifted uncomfortably. "High Chief, surely you cannot compare our offerings to children's drawings," he said. "The crystals we have brought are worth millions. Your crystals are worth exactly what you paid for them," Vorathrex replied. "These drawings are worth exactly what these children put into them, which is everything they have." He turned back to Yuna, who had remained silent during this exchange. "You came here knowing that I might refuse you," he said. "You came here knowing that you might lose everything and return to your colony empty-handed." "Yes," Yuna said. "And yet you came anyway," Vorathrex said. "Why?" "Because my students believe that dragons are heroes," Yuna answered. "And I needed to find out if they were right." Vorathrex was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up to his own chest and plucked a single scale from his body. The sound it made was like a bell being struck, and every Draconari in the hall dropped to their knees in shock. The scale was small compared to Vorathrex's massive form, but it shimmered with inner fire like a captured star. "Do you know what this is?" Vorathrex asked. Yuna's eyes widened, and for the first time she seemed genuinely surprised. "A chief scale," she whispered. "Given only to those who are adopted into the imperial bloodline. You have done your research well," Vorathrex said. "This scale has not been given to anyone in over 2,000 years, because no one has been worthy of it." He held the scale out toward her. "I am not giving you 25 cents. Teacher Yuna," he said, "I am giving you something far more valuable. And I am giving it to you because you reminded me of who my people were meant to be." Yuna reached out with trembling hands and took the scale. It was warm against her skin, pulsing with ancient energy. "What does this mean?" she asked. Though she suspected she already knew, "It means that you and your students are now under my personal protection," Vorathrex said. "It means that your colony is claimed by the Draconari Empire, not as a territory to be exploited, but as a ward to be guarded, my chief." "This is unprecedented," Kovath said with desperation in his voice. "The other powers will protest. Then let them protest to me directly," Vorathrex said. "Let them come to this hall and explain why they deserve to threaten children who draw dragons with flowers on their scales." He rose to his full height, and his shadow covered the entire chamber. "I will visit this colony personally," he announced. "I will meet these children who believe that dragons can be kind, and I will see if their faith in us is justified." The hall erupted in chaos once again. Advisors argued with each other in urgent whispers. Diplomats from other species rushed to send messages to their governments. The Earth delegation stood frozen in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. But Yuna simply looked down at the scale in her hands and smiled. She had come here hoping for recognition and protection for her students. She had received something far more valuable. She had received hope. "Thank you, High Chief," she said softly. "Do not thank me yet, Teacher Yuna," Vorathrex replied. "Thank me when your children are safe and your colony is thriving. And thank me when they have grown into the future they deserve." "I will," Yuna promised. "I know you will," Vorathrex said, and there was something like warmth in his ancient voice. "Because you are the kind of person who keeps her promises, and I have not met someone like that in a very long time." He turned to address his advisors with fire in his eyes. "Prepare my ship," he commanded. "We leave for New Horizon in 3 days, and I want everything ready for a proper state visit." The advisors scrambled to obey, too shocked to argue further, and in the middle of the chaos, Yuna carefully gathered her students' drawings and placed them back in her bag along with the priceless scale. She had a lot of preparing to do. Her children were about to meet a real dragon. The obsidian throne hall stretched for nearly a kilometer inside the heart of a dead volcano, and every surface gleamed with the black glass that gave the chamber its name. Vorathrex, the Undying, sat upon his throne of cooled magma, his scales the color of dying stars, his eyes burning with fire that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. He was old beyond measure, and he was bored beyond description. The petitioners came, as they always did, one after another in an endless parade. Requests and offerings and desperate pleas. A merchant guild from the Tazari Collective offered 17 tons of rare crystals in exchange for mining rights in the outer territories. Vorathrex granted their request with a wave of one massive claw. Barely listening to their words of gratitude, a military commander from the Vorthian Empire sought an alliance against their enemies, promising eternal loyalty and tribute. Vorathrex declined with a single word, and the commander retreated with terror in his multiple eyes. This was how it had been for 3,000 years. Every species in the sector eventually found their way to this throne, seeking something from the Draconari Empire and its Ancient ruler, they offered planets, and wealth and armies and secrets. They begged and bargained and threatened and pleaded, and Verathrex listened to them all with the patience of a being who had forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. His advisors stood in a row behind the throne, each one a Draconari of considerable age and power. Though none came close to matching the High Chief Korvath, his first voice leaned forward and whispered the details of the next petitioner, a trade delegation from the human colonies. "My chief," Korvath said with obvious disdain in his voice, "they are a minor species from the outer sectors, barely worth our attention. But protocol demands we hear them." Verathrex made a sound that might have been a sigh. If dragons could sigh, the humans were a young race, aggressive and adaptable, but lacking the technology or numbers to matter in galactic politics. He had met a few over the centuries and found them neither impressive nor offensive. They were simply there, like countless other species struggling to find their place among the stars. The delegation entered the hall, a group of 7 humans in formal attire that looked shabby compared to the crystalline robes of the Tessari or the battle armor of the Vorthian. 6 of them walked with the nervous energy of prey animals entering predator's den, but the 7th walked differently. She was small even by human standards, a woman with black hair pulled back from her face, and eyes that held something Verathrex had not seen in a very long time. She was not afraid. The delegation's leader stepped forward and began speaking about trade agreements and diplomatic relations and mutual cooperation. Verathrex listened with half his attention, already preparing to dismiss them with whatever minor concession would make them leave quickly. But his eyes kept returning to the woman at the back of the group. She was not part of the official delegation. He could tell by the way the others positioned themselves, by the cheaper quality of her clothing, by the way she clutched a warm bag against her chest like it contained something precious. When the delegation leader finished his speech, Verathrex nodded slowly and prepared to deliver his standard response. "Your proposals will be considered by my advisors," he began. But the woman stepped forward before he could finish. "High Chief Verathrex," she said in a clear voice that carried through the massive hall, "I have a separate petition, if you will hear it." The delegation leader turned with shock and horror on his face. "Yuna, what are you doing?" he hissed. This was not part of the agreement, but the woman named Yuna did not step back. Korvath bristled with anger at this breach of protocol. "You dare interrupt the High Chief with an unscheduled petition," he snarled. "Guards, remove this human immediately." Draconari soldiers moved forward, each one large enough to crush the small woman with a single hand. But Verathrex raised one claw, and everyone in the hall froze. "Let her speak," he said. And even he was surprised by the curiosity in his own voice. Yuna bowed deeply, showing respect without showing fear. "Thank you, High Chief," she said. "My petition is simple, and I believe you will find it unusual." "Many beings believe their petitions are unusual," Verathrex replied. "They are almost always wrong. But speak, human, and let us see if you are different." Yuna straightened her spine and met his burning gaze directly. "I am requesting a gift from you, High Chief," she said. "A gift of exactly 25 human cents in Draconari currency." Silence fell over the obsidian throne hall. Korvath made a choking sound of disbelief. The delegation leader covered his face with his hands. The other petitioners waiting in the hall began whispering to each other in confusion. Verathrex stared at the small human woman who stood before him without trembling in 3,000 years of rule. He had been offered entire star systems and begged to spare billions of lives. He had been presented with treasures beyond imagination and weapons, capable of destroying worlds, and now a human teacher was asking him for 25 cents. Is this some form of joke? Korvath demanded. Is this human mocking the High Chief? I am completely serious, Una said without looking away from Varathrex. I need exactly that amount, no more and no less. Why? Varathrex asked. And the single word echoed through the hall like thunder. Because that is the minimum value required for a formal gift under Section 47 of the ancient Draconari codes. Una answered. The law that grants the recipient the right to petition for formal recognition and protection under your personal authority. The silence that followed was absolute. Korvath's jaw dropped open, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth. The other advisors exchanged looks of stunned disbelief. Even the guards seemed uncertain, their discipline cracking in the face of something none of them had expected. Varathrex leaned forward on his throne, his massive body casting shadows that swallowed the small human whole. But still she did not step back. You know our ancient laws, he said slowly. You know them better than most of my own people know them. I have spent 2 years studying them, Una said. I sold everything I owned to afford passage to this world. And I have come here with a single purpose. And what purpose is that? Varathrex asked. Una reached into her warm bag and pulled out a single piece of paper covered in childish drawings. I need to tell you about my students, she said, and why 47 children on a dying world are worth more than everything else. You have been offered today. Varathrex settled back on his throne, and for the first time in centuries, he felt something stir in his ancient heart. It might have been interest, it might have been hope. He was not certain anymore what such feelings meant. Tell me about your children. Teacher Una, he said. I am listening. Una held the drawing carefully in her hands as she began to speak, and every being in the obsidian throne hall listened with growing fascination. New Horizon is a small agricultural colony on the edge of 3 disputed territories, she said. When my parents brought me there as a child, it was supposed to become a paradise. A new beginning for families who wanted to build something better. Varathrex nodded slowly, his burning eyes fixed on the small human woman. I know of New Horizon, he said. It exists in a region where the Vorthian Empire, the Tessari Collective, and the Krethian Federation all claim ownership. But none will act for fear of triggering war with the others. Yes, Una said. And because of that, we exist in legal limbo. And no major power will trade with us or provide aid or even acknowledge that we exist, because doing so would be seen as taking sides in the territorial dispute. Korvath snorted with dismissal. A common situation in border regions, he said. What does this have to do with wasting the High Chief's time with requests for pocket change? Una turned to face the advisor directly. It has everything to do with it, she said. Because my colony is dying and no one will help us. And I have 47 children in my school who deserve better than to fade away in silence. She reached into her bag again and pulled out more papers, each one covered in drawings made with crude materials. Our supplies ran out 8 months ago, she continued. We have no books, no tablets, no educational materials of any kind. And I have been teaching my students using sticks and dirt and stories from memory. A sad situation, another advisor said with obvious insincerity. But surely you do not expect the Draconari Empire to provide charity to every struggling colony in the sector. I do not expect charity, Una said firmly. I expect you to follow your own laws. She turned back to Varathrex and held up the drawing in her hands. This was made by a boy named Minho, she said. He is 6 years old, and he has never seen a dragon except in the stories I tell him. The drawing showed a massive creature with scales and wings, holding a tiny human figure in its claws. The human was smiling, and the dragon was protecting it from angry-looking stars. I taught my students about the Draconari, Una said. Not as conquerors or monsters, but as guardians, because that is what your people were before empire and politics. complicated everything. Varathrax felt something shift in his chest. Something he had not felt in a very long time. You taught them to see us as protectors. He said. I taught them the truth, Una replied. The ancient Draconari were guardians of the weak and defenders of those who could not defend themselves. And that is the legacy your laws were built upon. She stepped closer to the throne, still showing no fear despite the guards who tensed at her movement. Section 47 of the Ancient Codes was created for dragon hatchlings, she said. When a young dragon received their first coin from the High Chief, they became flame-touched, and they gained the right to petition for recognition and protection. That law has not been invoked in over 2,000 years, Korvath said with growing alarm. It was meant for our own kind, not for alien species. The law does not specify species, Una said. I have read every word of it. And it says only that any being who receives a gift directly from the High Chief becomes flame-touched. And there is no exception for humans or any other race. The hall erupted in chaos. Advisors shouted at each other in the Draconari tongue. Other petitioners from alien species began arguing among themselves. The delegation leader from Earth looked like he wanted to sink into the floor and disappear, but Varathrax remained still, his eyes never leaving Una's face. You found a loophole in our ancient laws, he said when the noise died down. You spent years studying our traditions, and you traveled across the sector with nothing but drawings made by children, all to ask me for the smallest possible amount that would activate this provision. Yes, Una said simply. Why should I honor such manipulation? Varathrax asked. Why should I not simply refuse your petition and send you back to your dying colony with nothing? Una nodded as if she had expected this question. Because of what these children made for you, she said. And she opened her bag completely. Inside were dozens of drawings, each one created by a different child using crushed berries and charcoal on salvaged packaging material. Some dragons were purple, with too many legs. Some had flowers growing from their scales. One showed a dragon breathing rainbows. Instead of fire, another depicted a dragon reading a book to a group of tiny humans. My students have never seen a Draconari, Una said as she spread the drawings on the floor before the throne. They have never met anyone from your species, and they know nothing of your politics or your empire. She picked up each drawing and named its creator. This one is from Suman, who wants to be a doctor when she grows up, and this one is from Jiwan, who lost his parents last year but still smiles every day, and this one is from Yunji, who believes dragons are the most beautiful creatures in the universe. Varathrax descended from his throne. The movement was so unexpected that everyone in the hall gasped and stepped backward. No one could remember the last time the High Chief had left his seat during an audience. He lowered his massive head until he was at eye level with the small human woman they made. These for me, he said, and his voice was softer than anyone had ever heard it. They made these for the dragon I told them about, Una said. The guardian who protects children, the ancient one who remembers what it means to be kind. Varathrax picked up the drawing that Minho had made, handling it with surprising gentleness, despite his enormous claws. This child drew me protecting a human, he said. He drew what he hopes she will be, Una said. They all did. An advisor pushed forward with anger burning in his eyes. These are worthless scraps, he spat. Trash made by alien children who know nothing of our culture. And the High Chief should not waste his time with such pathetic offerings. The temperature in the hall rose by 20 degrees in an instant. Varathrax turned his head toward the advisor, and his eyes blazed with fire that had not been seen in centuries. In Draconari culture, gifts made by the young are sacred, he said, his voice a rumble of barely contained rage. They represent the future and the hope of generations yet to come. And to insult such a gift is to insult the giver's lineage and their entire bloodline. The advisor dropped to his knees. Trembling, I apologize, High Chief, he stammered. I did not think. No, Verathrex agreed. You did not. He turned back to Yuna, who had watched the exchange without flinching. Tell me more about your students. Teacher Yuna, he said, tell me what they dream of becoming. And tell me why you believe 47 children on a forgotten world deserve the attention of the Draconari Empire. Yuna smiled for the first time since entering the hall. Because every child deserves someone to believe in them, she said. And because I think you have forgotten what it feels like to be believed in. Verathrex was silent for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. A deep rumbling sound that shook the walls of the ancient throne hall. You are either the bravest human I have ever met, he said, or the most foolish. Perhaps I am both, Yuna replied. Perhaps you are, Verathrex agreed. And he picked up another drawing to examine it more closely.